Well, we'll take stock of how markets responded last week as well as how Monday morning has opened up for Asia as well as for the futures across the board. When we look at US markets, they were mixed on Friday. In fact, the Dow was up around 0.4%, but when we look at the S&P 500 as well as the Nasdaq, they were down. S&P 500 down around 0.25% or so, and the Nasdaq down around 1.34%. The Dow Jones, of course, extended its decline to second week in a row. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq snapped their 3-week gains, which they had clocked over the preceding 3 weeks. When we look at Europe, it was positive across the board, 1% gains across the board across major indices. When we look at the DAX, it was up almost 1.5%. FTSE was up over 1.5%. The CAC 40 up around 1.3%, and so was the S&P. The stock 600, apologies. When we look at Asia, well, Asia closed positive on Friday, but when we look at early cues this Monday morning, Asia is broadly down, other than the ASX 200, which is holding on to around 0.1% of gains. So very, very slim gains for the ASX 200, but across the board otherwise it's negative cues coming out. When we look at the Nikkei, it's down around 0.7%, the Shanghai down 1.9%, the Hang Seng down 2.5%, and the Kospi down 0.5% or so. When we look at the SGX Nifty, also that's also throwing up negative cues, down around 0.75% in early trade today. So negative cues at the moment coming out from indices as well as futures. When we look at the US futures, they're lower as well, and by quite a margin. Around the Dow is down around 0.4%, S&P 500 futures down around 0.6% or so, and the Nasdaq futures down 0.75% as well, replicating pretty much how the SGX Nifty is doing in early trade today. When we look at how commodities are doing, well, oil has continued to taper downwards. It's below that $96 a barrel mark. In fact, Brent now closing in on that $100 a barrel mark, below that $101, comfortably below that at the moment. When we look at gold, it's very close to $1,950 an ounce as pressure builds up with higher inflation numbers as well as the Fed commentary expecting higher inflation coming through. The RBI also is expecting inflation by over 120 bips. They've increased their inflation forecast for FY23. When we look at bond yields, they are headed in a single direction, higher. 2.77% is what the US 10-year bond yield is currently standing at, and it's expected to continue to go higher. In fact, the dollar index also going strongly higher. When we look at the dollar index, it's very close to that 100 mark. It's in fact 99.8 as we speak in early trade. When we quickly look at how cryptos and Bitcoin is doing, of course, as anticipated in an era where interest rates are going to go higher, crypto will be beaten, and that's exactly what's happening. Crypto is lower, Bitcoin is now below that $42,000 mark in early trade today. An interesting week ahead of us in trade.